I'd like to call the regularly scheduled Board of Finance meeting for Monday, August 17th, 2015 to order. First order of business is public forum. Anyone wishing to address the board in public forum? Seeing that we have just town representatives here, I think that's highly unlikely. Move on to item 2. It's to approve the minutes. 2.1 would be the regular meeting minutes of July 20th, 2015. Any comments, questions, changes, deletions, etc.?
I have one typo,
Okay.
I think. On page 7, item 7,
Page 7, items.
in the first paragraph, the motion itself, it says voted to remove the table, from the table, the cabin chassis, no, forget it, never mind. Item table, never mind, that's fine. And then I had a question, though, on that same page to Mike regarding, we had a discussion, and I saw it was in the Standing Building Committee minutes as well. There's still some ongoing work at the auditorium at the high school, and apparently it's related to this moisture issue. They had to
Yes.
take up the floor. Was
Yes.
it the floor of the stage, the floor of the room itself?
No, it's floor of the stage.
And how would that have expressed itself at that point in the process?
I don't know the details of it. I know that there was, what ended up happening was there was actually water that was seen.
Okay.
And once they saw it in one location, they started ripping it up. All of the work was done obviously on their own dime. There was just an issue with moisture that penetrated. What
coming
ended
up
up,
from
what I
below.
believe happened was they put the flooring down, the subflooring down before it had fully dried, the concrete. I believe, and it happens. You could do all the concrete tests you want, but all of a sudden it transfers, and so they took care of it though.
As I recall, that was an elevated floor.
Yes.
It was all 2
It
by
was just the
4s or
stage area.
something.
It was just the stage area. It wasn't the entire
Entire floor.
auditorium floor, just the stage area
Okay.
where they had subfloor. It was the wood.
Okay. Others?
Yeah, that was, I think, another thing, the report on page 3 of the minutes, item 4, I think, refers to the Board of Education,
Right.
not town government.
Yep. Actually, thank you. I had something in that same section, page 3. And this was paragraph 3 under number 4. There was discussion between Mr. Gammerman and Mrs. Trudeau. And there's another typo right there, by the way. It's
Mr.
your husband
Trudeau.
was here last month. So Karen, if you wouldn't mind, paragraph 3. The question was the budget variance on paraprofessionals. And you had indicated that at the start of the year, when you were putting the budget together at that time, which would have been January or December of 2013, right? December of 2013. But anyway, your answer was that the budget number was lower than what it should have been. And I could probably do this under one of the 2 sets of reports that you have provided us this evening. But in fiscal year 2015, it looks as if you spent $2,373,000, which you said was against an original budget of $2,109,000. For fiscal year 2016, I think you've budgeted $2,086,000, which is some $300,000 less than what you actually spent in FY15. Is that number going to be good?
That number was based on the amount of paras that we were told we were going to need going forward, with some allotted for additional paras. So there have been some reductions and some moving of paras, and some not replacing of some positions as well for that. So at the time that I did the budget this year, December of 14, that number was good.
Okay, all right. But it was just pretty stark. It looks like about a $300,000 variance from what you actually spent last year versus what you're intending to spend this current fiscal year. Anybody else have anything before I dominate this? Well, I won't dominate for long. On page 2, section 3, correspondence, I had asked Sheila if about the engagement with Millman, and we're expecting the report will be finalized in September. Is that still going to be realistic?
I think so, yes. Yeah.
That gives everybody plenty of time to work it over. At some point, would it make sense for maybe the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, and the Pension Committee to meet to discuss that? Or should we set that type of meeting after we get the report?
I think that's probably a better idea. Let's look at the report and then I think that it's actually going to be presented to the Board of Selectmen on that.
It is, it's not going through the,
Well, I think it's coming to us first. So,
if you guys engage Millman, right?
yes.
And then it'll go to the pension committee
Committee.
afterwards. Yeah.
Well, we'll be anxious to see what the results of that are as well. Anything else on the minutes? Is there a motion to approve?
As amended, yeah.
Second? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
I abstain.
Recusals? All right, correspondence. 3.1, Standing Building Committee minutes. Mike, anything you want to bring to our attention?
Not this month.
Okay.
I was not at the, not able to attend the August meeting, and I know the meetings are a little bit delayed. So.
Questions?
Yeah, there's two things, really. The first is, and you can see that they took a lot of time, and there's considerable notes here about the upgrade and conversion of the science wing, and sort of putting on the sideline, essentially, the air conditioning for that. Having it, it's interesting, it's sort of an add-on budget, or an add-on bid item. Hard to fathom that we would end up with an exercise facility, at least in part, that would not be air conditioned. I mean, you're going to have kids in there in August preparing for football,
Well, you're going to have regular people in there.
all summer.
Yeah, all summer.
So did the building committee.
Okay,
Have concerns about that.
but they passed it through anyway. I mean, you can see they talked about
The
it.
likelihood of that going through and AC being, or air conditioning being installed is likely. But because of the way the bids came in, they wanted to see how the base numbers came in before they started committing to the air conditioning. The air conditioning is not going to cause you to not get a CO.
Okay.
It's just a comfortability factor. But it is certainly
Close to.
hard to imagine that a fitness center or a fitness area would have no AC. But they are trying to get that in and make sure it's within the budget.
In your extensive experience in this industry, you know, the term HVAC includes both heat and air
Heating,
conditioning.
ventilation,
Air conditioning. Is there a substantial difference in price for just heating and ventilation
Yes.
versus heating, ventilation, and AC?
There is, based on the coolants needed and the equipment that are needed for the cooling aspect of it. Yeah.
Doubles the cost or more than doubles it? So
That's not my, unfortunately, that's the consultant's line of work. I'm not quite sure what that, I would say it's probably a 50 to 60% upcharge.
Right.
Yeah.
The only other question I had was on item 11, and that's the update and presentation on the performance contracting.
You beat me to it.
It seems as if there's some legs to this project. The Standing Building Committee is recommending that the Board of Education proceed with engaging this firm.
Yeah, these are all from the July minutes, which I believe nobody had yet last month, but now you all have them, and I reported on them
Yes.
last
Yep.
month.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
So, yeah, it's a little bit delayed. If I recall correctly, the Standing Building Committee just listened to a presentation from this consultant, and their recommendation is for the Board of Education to look further into energy performance contracting. They weren't recommending to move forward with it. It was for the Board of Ed to look at it. And again, I would look at, Susan's here.
Well, the
and
minutes
The
say,
minutes say that the Board of Ed
The-
will likely come back to the board.
There was actually, I
Standing
know, some
building.
meeting minutes that were, I think, part of our package, whether it was the digital version or the hard copy version. The Board of Ed did get a presentation on July 13th, I think, which was a week after the building committee. And I have to admit, I don't remember exactly if there was a motion made on it. I think it was just a presentation, and it was a thank you, and we'll get back to you.
right. The interesting piece, not to split hairs, but there was a motion made by the Standing Building Committee and passed, that recommend the Board of Ed proceed with pursuing an energy performance contracting project by utilizing the services of ECG Engineering. So engage ECG Engineering to prepare to go out to bid and so forth.
Yes.
Is that your understanding as well?
No, I know.
It was a recommendation to pursue further looking at it, but it was not a,
Yeah, and again, splitting hairs, it says they should be utilizing this engineering firm to do more work. And
Right.
my assumption is that's going to go to the board for some approval.
Plan to discuss it further.
And the other thing is there's always the opportunity for the town, as is stated in these minutes, the town to piggyback on that. But as Joe will tell you, we had Johnson Controls in here that did the very same thing 20 years ago, whatever it was.
And as Joe will tell you, like he told you last meeting, most of the recommendations that the consultant has proposed, we have done.
Right.
Okay, so
So there may not be the opportunities they think are
not
there.
at this time, but we'll take a look at it.
Yeah.
you know.
All right.
It's just the parts I circled here, I mean, they use very aggressive language, though. Future guaranteed energy savings, right?
Right,
No out-of-pocket cost for the town. Maybe these are minutes, we weren't there, maybe these aren't their exact words. All the payments are to be made from money saved from reduced energy use. I mean, my sense is if they are as confident in their proposal as they are saying, they would truly make it no risk to the town, and any deficiencies between what the, the equipment costs were and the projected savings, if they were going to bear the risk, then I'd be happy to jump on board, but if the town has to pay any differential, I'd be less interested, I guess, is what it comes down to.
Anything else?
Yeah, just make the comment that the devil is kind of in the details with these contracts, but I think it's maybe a good idea to have an open ear and see what they have to offer.
Sure.
It'd be kind of a little odd to retrofit the high school after we just started to build it, but
That would
maybe
be
some of
odd.
our other facilities
I would
are
imagine that
big
would
enough
not be
to
the first
to
building.
yield some
That
kind of
is what
savings.
has concerned me, is that is the single largest facility we have in the community, the biggest consumer of energy services, if you will. And that's going to be left out, virtually left out of this project. So, that aggressive 20% savings, I don't know whether that, is a standard number they throw out for communities of our size and the number of buildings we have, but, once you,
We've got 6 other schools, we've
We
got a
do.
community center, and
Right.
got
Town hall.
some facilities that could have a look at.
What I'd be interested in is if it does move forward, how many of the projects that they're recommending also happen to be on the facilities report that we have, that we're going to need to address anyway. So there could be some dovetail there.
Good point.
We have any further updates on the renovations at Jones and the elevator replacement? I know that you said back a month ago that it would be delayed somewhat, but shouldn't inconvenience too many
I have to admit, I
people.
can't report on them. The only project I know that is going to be an issue with completion, which we already discussed last month, was the elevator
Elevator.
at Adams. From what I could tell from other meeting notes that we had received from the Board of Ed, it seemed like the projects are tracking fine. There had been no concerns a month ago when I was at the schedule was very tight. They knew what they needed to do. So I can't report back specifically, but there were no issues that they expected at all during the summer with these types of projects anyway. But, yeah, I don't know, Sue, if you've heard anything, or Linda, from your end?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, the Board of Ed Operations Committee meeting minutes were from July 13th, which was only a week after the Standing Building Committee, so they're really not,
Right.
no substantial differences between the two. So,
Berman provided a update of projects for me to present at the last Board of Ed meeting because he was away on vacation. And at that time, he said all the projects they were pushing to have everything ready, the Jones Security, they were pushing to have the art room done, which was the one big piece at Jones School. The Adams elevator, they're saying should be completed by the second week after school opens.
That's right.
And they'll make accommodations for any student that needs to be as far as moving classrooms.
That's right.
And everything else should be done in time for school to open.
but you've got the benefit of a later schedule, later opening in the schedule as well.
I was just going to say, the one thing that everyone has their advantage for all these projects is that there's about 10 days more than typical to complete the projects, so
That's
that's
the
helped,
schedule, yeah.
because the schedule 8th being the opening.
Anything further? 3.2, pension committee minutes. Any comments, questions?
I was just curious if some of the changes have taken place. I know you were looking at options and maybe going to hire some new providers.
They did.
It looks like there was a vote
Looks like they
on one
moved a couple,
manager
yeah.
at least.
There has been one, we actually made an allocation to our first mutual fund. So, but they're still working on others that they're meeting this week to continue the discussions.
Yeah, I'd make a comment on that. It's kind of interesting because I guess Wentworth Housing was dropped. But it's kind of interesting, someone pointed out that out of the 5 years or 7 years, they outperformed, 2 times, and 5 out of the 7 years they underperformed. But another statistic that I looked at is the alpha. And basically, alpha measures if the market is flat, what value does this manager offer? Basically, he offers minus 4.3% over the last 5 years, ending June 30th. The other statistic that I looked at was beta, and he's 1.2. So he takes 22% more risk, but provides more than 4% negative returns. But in spite of that, so I'm glad that basically he was replaced, or you're going to get another international mutual fund. But if you look at the 10-year number, this is kind of interesting. If you look at the annualized return versus his indice, EFA, the annualized return is 7.9%. The MCI EFA, their performance was 5.2. So you actually outperformed in a 10-year period on an annual basis of 2.7% or 2.8%. But for the last 5 years, obviously, he takes a lot of risk. He has a very concentrated position, and if he makes the wrong move, I mean, he basically is underperforming substantially. So I think firing that particular manager, replacing with another mutual fund, makes a lot of sense. So I approve that.
Unfortunately, we did not have Wentworth for 10 years, so obviously, based on your statistics, the first 5 years were the strong years, and we didn't have the benefit of.
Well, they always say, past performance is not an indication.
That's right. I've heard that disclaimer before.
Anything else on the pension? All right, let's move on to item 4. Review and accept report of expenditures to the Board of Education. And we'll start with 4.1, fiscal year 2014-2015. And Sue Renner, welcome as the into the celebrity chair here.
Thank you for inviting me to come talk about the July expenditures.
Our pleasure.
To go chronologically and talk about the old fiscal year first, the 14-15 year. Your reports show expenditures of $983,983.56. As Jeff pointed out, that number is reduced somewhat by refunds and so on that we have coming into our account to a net number of $924,652. It's the cleanup month, basically July, so it's a much lower number than the $4 million or so that we usually do present to you. The surplus for the year, I'll call it, based on this report, is about $67,000. Now, since the time that this was prepared, we've had some more bills come in, and we're looking at an expected $43,000 remaining in our budget. We do plan to discuss how we'd like to handle the $43,000. We have time at our next meeting to talk about this. We'd like to do whatever's the most really responsible thing for the town, letting it remain in fund balance. We've discussed making an additional contribution toward our pension obligation. We've discussed putting it into the medical account. We've discussed asking your board to consider putting some funds into the capital and non-recurring fund that exists. So we'll take that up at our next meeting. And
There's already been some discussion, I think, relative to the size of the fund, the undesignated fund balance, which is, for lack of a better term, very healthy right now. And it served us quite well when we went to the bond market a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, whatever it was. And I know that the Board of Selectmen is entertaining discussions about reserving some of that for more specific purposes, as opposed to leaving it in the undesignated fund. I think, quite honestly, my first reaction would be, I think it would make most sense to move it undesignated fund balance, and then we would take the opportunity to see what we do with it. And if it means a specific fund, a capital fund for the Board of Education, I'm sort of hesitant to do that. I'd like to do one that combines both
Townwide.
entities,
Yes, for
townwide.
sure.
And again, I think we're in a pretty healthy position relative to the Employee Benefits Fund right now. We're in a very strong position there. The only one, the contribution to the pension is a good idea. It's always a good idea to overfund where we can, or to fund in a strong manner. We've seen the benefit of that in this year's budget. But there is an opportunity also that our profile may be changing relative to our future obligations on the pension. So throwing money into that right now, I don't think makes an awful lot of sense until we see what Millman comes back with. So it would be, again, one person here. I don't know how everybody else feels, but I would feel most comfortable having it fall to fund balance. Undesignated or whatever the term is now, right? Unassigned, I'm sorry, thank you.
Okay, all right.
I'm too old to change horses now.
Well, that's useful guidance, and I'll bring
Okay.
that back to our
Thank you.
discussions. That's great.
Unless anybody feels differently here.
Do you think that salary analysis is really going to yield that kind of difference? Wouldn't it be
It has a potential.
perhaps
It-
productive to put it into the pension?
I think the opportunity we would have would be our long-term obligations are not what we thought they were. And therefore, our contributions to keep it funded at appropriate levels will not be as significant. So we could see, theoretically, I don't want to say similar size reduction, or I would see a possibility for our pension contribution requirement to drop next year. Because the rule of thumb, they were using 4% annual salary increases for the last 15, 20 years. And we haven't seen anything near those. So those are the basis for your long-term obligations. And I think at worst case scenario, we're talking 3% maybe average over that period. Worst case scenario, right? So that's a full 25% more than actual, so, excuse me, 33%.
On average,
33%.
you haven't hit 3% on average.
Yeah, it's not, it hasn't been 3 over the last 15 years.
We won't know where we are until we get the evaluation, which we don't receive until January.
Right.
So, and that determines our contribution for
Next
the
year.
2017
Right.
budget year. So,
Yeah. Well, and we just talked about earlier, we'll get a report from Millman as to what the impact may be over the long term, so we'll start to see something. But you're right, we normally don't get those numbers until we prepare the budget, so.
It's a little more likely than not that we're going to have a positive impact. You think
I don't want to
this is
say.
I don't know,
as they've run?
I'm not an actuary, and I don't claim to be, I don't even play one on TV. So, but the way it's been explained to me is if you're using an assumption set that says this is what your future obligations are going to be based on this, and this turns out to be this, you got to see a correlation, right?
Yeah,
There's
I
got to be
agree.
some kind of correlation, so. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's fine. The categories ended up basically as we discussed in prior months, so I don't think there'll be any surprises there. I think I'd like to go directly to the warrants and point out some highlights.
Can I go to
course.
the line items themselves, please?
Certainly.
Teacher line item, in July, you had 113,209 in expenditures. Was there a payroll that fell into July, or is that the teachers who opt to get paid through the course of the summer?
It's actually neither. It was a sick pay payout for retired teachers. There were 4 teachers who retired with their maximum number of sick days in the bank.
Okay.
And in the expenditures, you see a payment of $125,000 for those 4 individuals.
Okay.
Yes.
All
I
right.
also wanted,
And so the teachers that get paid out of through the summer, when July hits, does it go into 2016 fiscal year budget, or is it the 2015
No,
budget?
it all hit on June 3rd, it was posted to June 30th, so it was in last month's report for for June.
Okay.
And all the expense hits, but the actual disbursement of the checks don't occur until over the summer.
Excellent. So you're going to wind up with almost $100,000 in surplus on your teacher salary account.
Yes.
Then, sorry to jump to
No,
2015, 2016 fiscal year.
15, 16, okay.
Expenditures through 7/31/15 for teachers was $50,718. So I think you see why I'm asking the first question, because we have an expenditure for teachers in July. And how does that work?
In the new year budget, so we have the salaries of the full-time employees and the summer program people, so that's where the teacher salaries are.
Since we're comparing the 2 years, I was puzzled by 2 sets of figures here. In 2014-15, if you look at transportation, transportation in 2015-16 drops by $200,000 over the current, it's not the current year anymore, over the past year, which was 2.9 million. I'm wondering why that figure would drop when the trends always seem to be upward in terms of special ed transportation fueling that line. That's one thing. I had another question that's related to it, and it all feeds into the overall question of special education, which is special services. Now, if you look at special services, the 15-16 year is carrying a number of about 675,000, which is $110,000 over 14-15. So on the one end, the number goes up. On the other end, it goes down. Special services is a matter of fact, I've always wondered what percentage of special education is the special services budget. I mean, of the total special education budget.
Let me answer the second question. I think the
Because
reason,
you
I
can
think,
see that, yeah.
I think the reason the appropriation is 675,000 is because they spent 627,000 this past year against a budget of 565. So they made an adjustment. They knew they were
Okay.
going to be over, so that one
Okay.
is fine.
That's
The-
also got to be related to the in-house programs that we've heard a couple of times, we've got
Part of it.
presentations,
Part of it.
that, they're bringing in professionals, the occupational therapists and the, right.
All right, I don't have an answer for the transportation, I'm sure you do.
The biggest part of that change is for the fuel, and I decreased our commitment for our contract for fuel because we've been carrying over fuel every year and paying the storage fees. I tried to eliminate that, so I reduced our commitment for fuel by 40,000 gallons, I think it was. So we have a lower budget for fuel because we're not going to be buying as much in the coming year. Because we do have a carryover again this year.
Okay.
So we're going to use the carryover. We're going to use the carryover, and we're not going to have, hopefully, a carryover going into, I'm going to get my years confused, 16, 17. So we hopefully use up our fuel this year. So we adjusted the budget to accommodate for our contract.
So now you have 3 categories, maybe there's more, that add up to special education. There's transportation, there's tuition, and there's special services.
And there's paraprofessionals.
Salaries.
Paraprofessionals, and there's teacher salaries, and there's
So
occupational therapists.
what
and
fits into the
teachers.
special services?
It depends on what categories you want to include in there. Are you looking at special ed just for those outplaced students, so it's just the tuition and the transportation? Are you looking at special ed including all the in-house students? That'd be a really tough number to figure because you have teachers and some people that do work in both areas. So, I mean, it would be all the speech teachers, all the occupational therapists, physical therapists, all the contracted services, special ed teachers.
And it's allocated proportionately.
Other staff, the coordinators, the director. I mean, I could put together a number and I probably would miss pieces of it, so I don't know how accurate it would be.
I think it's relatively safe to say most of that number is special ed numbers.
Yeah.
In one form or fashion. We're not talking about necessarily the kids that we're sending out of district, but those that have some special needs. And whether they be on a minor level or a more extreme level, I think that most of that is in that line item. I know at some point in your career on this board, you're going to get to a number, that the total number that we spend on special education. I'm not sure you're going to get there. You're fighting that windmill.
You know, I'd
that
like to
windmill.
follow that train of thought, though. You know, I think we have talked a lot about special ed and that we're making efforts to bring it in-house and we're making efforts to save money. And it does become a bit convoluted to try to figure out if our efforts are effective. And I think we know that we're doing this the right way. I think we agree on that we're making a program that's more attractive to people that's in-house. So we're really providing a good service, but at the same time, we are trying to control costs. And, you know, I feel like it's a time at the end of the year where it's time to be a little bit reflective. You know, did this investment work? Did this strategy work? Are we providing good service and controlling costs in terms of special ed? So I have actually wondered as a board member, you know, why it's not separated out, at least in aggregate. I understand that we need to protect individuals and their privacy.
There's something very important, though, that you really can't quantify in that kind of analysis, and that's the student who doesn't leave the district, who stays in the district, and that's the whole goal of what we're trying to accomplish.
Sure, mainstream.
And you can't quantify that.
I follow you.
It goes to, I was about to say, it goes to the definition of special education. And I just said there are students who need very minimal levels of help, and then there are students who need to be outplaced. And that spectrum is so wide that identifying all of those resources associated with those is somewhat difficult.
I actually want to just take this.
For the very reason you said, there are some paraprofessionals who work with special needs kids and work with regular students in the same day, maybe within the same hour.
So I actually want to take this train of thought another level, another step, and that is that sometimes we're embarking upon programs. For instance, the coaching has been kind of has some momentum, and we've been hiring coaches for professional development. So I'm curious, you know, as we look back, where is the dividend? You know, is there a concrete dividend that's given us in terms of skills or just improvement in education that might be somehow measurable? And I would take this to almost all the programs that we're doing. You know, did Common Core state recommendations really work? Did the performance evaluations that the state has recommended, are they working in some way? Are they providing a benefit? Because they've all definitely had a cost. So I'm obviously that's a broad subject, but you know, I just think sometimes we need to look at numbers that way and say, you know, was this worthwhile? Was this effective?
One of the interesting things about providing government and municipal services is that the straight cost-benefit analysis that you would normally employ in traditional businesses doesn't necessarily apply. And it is difficult to get at those outcomes. I would suggest you take a look at the U.S. News and World Report rankings on our high school, our profiles. I think Chairman Bloss gave a very eloquent explanation of where we've been, where we've come, and where we rank based on our per pupil expenditure versus other districts in our ERG, DIRG, or whatever it's called these days, like communities. The number is, you know, in our DIRG, there are only 2 schools that spend less than us, and we exceed by all the testing standards almost 80% of those schools in our DIRG in terms of outcomes. Can you tie that to a specific expenditure, or is it the philosophy and the programs that we have in totality? And then I'll also go one step further. In manufacturing production, they talk about if you work with good raw materials, you wind up with better products. All right? If your processes are work. So I think the fact of the matter is we've been presented with some analysis that suggests that this district is doing more with less against our competitors or our peer group. And I'm sure, I think you were here when Bill made that presentation, and I'm sure he'd be happy to share with us the data that he's collected on that.
And I absolutely agree with you. I mean, it's not broken. It's an excellent system here, and the results speak for themselves. But it's just difficult to tell if, you know, the U.S. and News World Report rankings were that different from 5 years ago before this program or before that program. And I just think a reflective look might help us go forward. What works, what doesn't, what really makes things better. And obviously you don't measure that in dollars and cents. You measure that in the outcomes for the students. You You know, we're all here in this jurisdiction because we appreciate the school system, and that's what attracted most of us
I
to
got a
this
question
town.
for Linda. I know I just read recently that Governor Malloy has indicated that the standard testing for juniors, the Common Core test, is going to be thrown out, and they're going to go with SATs for everyone. Is that a definite? Is that still in the planning stage? And why are they doing it?
I'm not sure why they're doing it. I know that was discussed.
I think it's cost,
Cost
and
saving
it's
measure.
a lot of districts don't have the funds to provide all the computer equipment that's necessary for all the Common Core testing. So the SAT.
Has there been a lot of complaints about Common Core at the high school level on a statewide basis?
Not that I'm aware of. It is one more test for kids to take, and the juniors are taking, most of them take SATs.
year.
They have AP tests, they do have a lot of tests crammed in. It is one more test.
And I
And
know there
The
was,
testing notwithstanding, Common Core has some other components to it which are significantly more important, and that is teaching to a level of excellence. Whether how I describe it or how you describe it, is it Common Core? Is it No Child Left Behind?
Curriculum
What
change.
is it? It's curriculum change to drive excellence in education. Whether we agree with the specific methodologies or not, but that is the significant part of it. It's not the testing. The testing is to do exactly what you just asked, which is how do we determine whether it's working or not? And in education, for years, it's predominantly been the mastery scores and the SAT scores.
And maybe that's unfair. You know, some are subjective and they're difficult to measure, but some are objective. But
And some
just
like me
generally,
didn't test well.
It goes beyond Common Core. I'm no expert on Common Core. Thank God the board and our superintendent is a scholarly expert on some of these subjects. But I'm just concerned. Is it the right direction? Do we get some bang for the buck? Even the logistics that we do for busing each year, which costs maybe $36,000 a year, does that really yield us something? So I wonder, and it's okay. Maybe sometimes we just have to do that to figure out if logistically we're being smart about our transportation. But I wonder.
just
Cost goes in, what comes out. I wonder. And then there's one other point I want to make too, in that our superintendent himself, who's done a fantastic job, and I'm always impressed with him, and my hat's off to him for what he's done with special education already. But we measure his performance by how he can give us some good results and pick the programs that work.
The Board of Education has given him a resounding endorsement.
Yes.
I have one more
It's true.
question on my comparative numbers, and that is tuition. Tuition, when we look at we went into the last year looking at a tuition number of $2,650,000. We wound up spending $3,780,000 for tuition. This year, which we're just into now, we reduced the budgeted amount from the original $2,650,000, say, to $2,400,000. And I wondered why we reduced the entry number when we had exceeded the larger entry number when we closed out 2014-15. Why did we do that?
Same answer.
when we did the budget, we looked at each individual student that was outplaced, and there were 5 or 6 students that were aging out. So we were no longer going to be responsible for those 5 or 6 students. Then we looked at other changes. So we knew there was one other student that would be coming back to the district. So we based it on the number of students that we, at that point,
I
knew
see.
were going to be outplaced, and then allowed for a couple possible unknowns because they do pop up during the year. Either somebody moves into the district or somebody is identified with that we have to
But we were
address.
comfortable going forward because we lost
Yes,
pretty heavy number.
yes.
It's a perfect example of zero-based budgeting. We're not taking last year's number, bumping it up, bumping it down. We're actually calculating based on the kids that we know we're working
As
with.
Lou said, this number, the revenue number explains it, okay.
That's the excess cost.
Right, which apparently, it's not actually in the 2016 number, because we don't know what it is until we receive it.
Right.
Until we.
I do account for receiving excess cost grant
At 70%.
at 70%, a much lower percentage than, we actually received about 78 this year. So I do factor in for receiving excess cost grant, but
Yeah, my only point is when you look at the 2016 budget, it's not projected on the sheet that we have. You know what I mean? It apparently accumulates as the year goes by, so that in the 2015, there's that $1.2 million figure, and on 2016's budget, there's $4,000, because that's all that's come in so far this month.
yeah, that's not excess cost, that's other tuition.
I think there's a good point buried in this conversation, and that is we're spending nearly $4 million. Oh, more than that, I'm sure, because we're only getting 70%
Right.
reimbursement, right? But our total spend is about $4 million on tuition, just tuition. All right, on a $56 million budget, which is what, 7.5%? That's just tuition.
With a surge in absorbing more in-house, despite that.
Right, exactly. Good.
I have a general question too. When I'm looking at special education and one of the lines here, we've already made some transfers to those lines already, right? In the mid-year, right?
In the 14-15 budget,
Yes,
yes.
in the 14-15 budget. So
Yes.
when I look at our comparison with last year and this year, I don't really see a
Right,
completely accurate number.
To put in one more column with the original budget in it, the report was so tiny, I didn't think you'd appreciate having to have a magnifying glass to read the report, so I dropped the column. I can put original budget in there, but it just made it too small, I thought, to look at.
So I'm
So
only
all the
concerned because
transfers.
at this level, obviously not completely accurate, I'm kind of winding the clock back and saying, we think that the in-house program might save us 1.2 million or whatever the figure was, but what really happened? And a lot of that has been explained, that, we did have an influx of more students, but, just curious, we thought we might save about $1 million. How did we really do?
Well, John, I'm pretty sure that was covered during the budget season. Jason had put together a pretty good graph that Dr. Freeman presented to us, and it was the opportunity cost gap analysis. Had we gone along without our program,
Yeah, I recall, about 6 months ago or so.
and quite honestly, I thought they used pretty conservative numbers for the out years. It was because the percentage increase was lower than our actual over the last 5 years. But it clearly showed, had we continued along that trend, and I don't know whether we would have or not, but there's a strong argument that we would, because the cost for those programs continued to rise. Even if we had the same number of kids in those programs, our costs would go up. But now, it was a pretty significant gap that he had put on that document.
Yeah, and I'm 100% for the program, and I think that it was very clear in the presentation, even with the forecast, that we were definitely saving by going in this direction and following this strategy. But I still am interested, what is the final picture?
Does anybody have any more questions on specific line items on this or warrants?
One small question. I'm just wondering, why is the legal services for the Board of Ed so high? I mean, last year we spent about $627,000, now we're budgeting $675,000. Why is it so high?
In 14-15, we negotiated 5 contracts.
Oh, I see.
And so we had legal expense for negotiating the 5 contracts. We won't have any contracts to negotiate in the 15-16 year.
Except the budget is higher.
No. 50,000 for this.
Yeah, thank you.
That's the problem with multiple sets of papers here.
So the budget for
Yeah.
legal year.
Fiscal year 2015-16.
I'm looking at the third line. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
yeah, that's special services.
Sorry.
That's okay.
It's hard to tell.
Any other?
I have a question.
Look.
In the Board of Ed meeting minutes, there is a discussion regarding the purchase of software for the food service program at the tune of $35,000. Seems like an impressive number. What is that doing exactly?
The whole 35,000 has a number of components. It would track the inventory, it would be the point of sales, it would be the platform for parents to put money on their students' accounts. It would do ordering. We are looking at phasing that implementation in, and the first phase of it, which would be the point-of-sale piece, would end up being about $20,000.
Meaning the cards that the kids can get charged
Right.
and they recharged,
Yes.
right?
So, it would
So
be-
how are we doing that now? I
We're
thought they had
using-
those.
We're using the Power School portion of, or the Power Lunch portion of Power School, and it only is a point-of-sale system. It doesn't allow for tracking of a more in-depth process. So right now, you either buy a meal or you buy an a la carte item. There's no in-between. So we can't say, okay, you're buying a meal and you're buying an extra water and you're buying chips. So it gives us a more detailed tracking of what's being purchased. It gives us a point-of-sale system that's, excuse me, a little bit more customized to each of the schools. It would give us the inventory tracking, which right now is done through actually an Access database, so it's an old antiquated system. Yeah, yeah.
So you're saying the current system is time-consuming and paper-intensive and...
And not efficient.
So to steal Jonathan's question, right, so this, is this $35,000? Are we going to see some administrative savings? Are we going to be able to order more efficiently? Are we going to be
Yes.
able to sell more of product A versus product D?
Right, so we can look at what's really being sold, what's not being sold, so we don't buy the one that's not being sold. We can limit ordering to, we found that some of the schools were buying X brand of cheese when they could go with this cheese, which is a good cheese, and not spend twice the price. So it would control our ordering across the district and give us better controls on our inventory as well, which they literally go in and count each piece. Now we can have an inventory that's saying, okay, you bought this much, you used this much, you should have this much on hand, and we'll have better control of our inventory.
Okay, thank you.
Apropos of that same area, in the Operations Committee meeting minutes of July 13th, page 2 at the bottom, Linda, you're reporting a reduction in the loss, which is certainly good,
Yes.
overall. However, you're also noting large deficits at Cox and Lakes, and there doesn't seem to be any accounting for those, or is this what your new software is going to help you with?
The software will help with some of that. There were a couple unusual circumstances that attributed to some of those losses in those schools. Employee out, so we had to pay another employee to come in, so we were paying two people at the same time. We were paying two managers for a while. There was, Lakes actually had the lower enrollment that attributed to a little bit of their decline. There was some difference in the ordering of what they were selling. So we've looked at a number of different things that all attribute to. We had some large equipment repair costs in one of those schools as well, which added to the loss. So we think that this new software is going to help in a lot of ways, but there's also some other internal changes that we're going to be doing with menus and presentation and other things to try and build sales in those schools.
I have a question related to that.
After almost 8 years, I can't believe I'm going to ask this. Where does, the food service, where does that fall?
It doesn't. It's a separate fund that's not
Separate fund, that's
in the
why I
report.
can't find it here.
That's why you
Okay.
can't find it.
It's a cash.
We talk about it, and then I just, I just
There's-
naturally
there's-
think, and then all of a sudden I look for it, I was like, my reason being 30,000 for software, or 35,000 for software to do this could make things efficient, but out of what type of a budget are we looking at for food service?
That's right.
Again,
There is no set budget for food service. The Board of Ed is paying for the software for the food service department. They have a separate fund for all their expenses, and there is no hard budget for it, which is one of the things that we're trying to work on.
Ultimately, it should be, correct me if I'm wrong, a wash, right? Should be the zero. In a perfect world.
Yes,
So this software hopefully will get it closer to the perfect world.
yes.
All right, Ken, come on, you gotta ask a question. It's the golf course question.
Don't disappoint you, Ken.
What?
Don't
We're not gonna stick with capital expenditures on the operating budget.
Board of Ed, let's keep them separate.
It's the golf course
You guys
question.
usually grow by the time these discussions
Keep
take
keep
place.
the accounting simple on this.
How do we handle,
There's managerial problems there.
I got a couple more.
Absolutely.
They're just general. You know, we talked a little bit about special ed, as we always do, right? And a little bit about the legal. I was wondering, too, we went kind of significantly over on the utilities, the telephone, the electricity, the water. I'm trying to remember, I think we've talked about this. Was that the high school build and paying some electricity that we didn't expect for construction? And
some of that was supposed to come back.
got hit on the utilities a little bit. Not too bad, but we were over.
So water is the irrigation.
Oh,
We got
right.
hit with a very large
Yes.
irrigation bill. Electricity. Anything for the new high school has been reimbursed. Or in
Okay.
here, we set up the receivable for what was due for the new high school. So that's not related to the new high school.
The electricity is 3% over budget, just to put
Yeah.
that in perspective, it's 3%.
Okay.
Yeah, off the top of my head,
Yeah, it wasn't
don't have,
monstrous, but I was just
Yeah,
wondering if
anything-
we got an increase in the middle or...
well, there,
The electric rates did go up.
but we were
Last
locked
year.
in to,
At one point, I thought the high school was off, the new building was off the same meter, and there was
I thought
supposed to
so,
be,
too,
it's
yeah.
supposed to be a reimbursement from the building, the high school building
right,
project.
they are reimbursing us.
Is that reflected here?
Yes, yes, it's, nothing for the new high school is in this report, we've took everything out.
Okay.
Set it up as a receivable for anything that we hadn't received from them yet.
There was a reimbursement in excess of 50,000 that came in July that is included in these numbers.
Other questions?
Site improvements, that was a little higher. Additional site improvements that were necessary?
Yes, there were additional site improvements, we had done a number of things in last summer. Plus, we had some expenses for the fitness center and even for the high school that were done out of this budget. So we actually gave facilities a little bit extra money to get some extra things done, so that's why they were over budget.
The retirement sick pay, it's a payment to annuity life insurance.
Right.
Basically, you took the money and that is going into pensions, so it's got pensions
No,
going to be greater?
it
Is that
goes
right?
it goes into a post-retirement medical trust fund.
Okay.
So those teachers can use their sick pay money for any post-retirement medical expenses. So it's set up in an account for them that's administered through Annuity Investors Life Insurance. And they can submit for any reimbursement for any post-retirement medical expenses they incur.
But it's not really an annuity where you get an income stream, it's just basically a pay, okay.
Right, it's just to reimburse them for their medical costs after retirement.
Thank you.
I was just curious, this discussion's come up before, are they still allowed to amass sick days, or is that something that is no longer policy?
There is a sunset on the teachers, but we still have a number of teachers that are eligible. So you can accumulate sick days, you don't get paid for them when you retire.
I see,
If you were hired after 1998, I believe it is.
yep, okay.
Anything else? Thank you.
That was almost easy.
All right, is there a motion to accept the report of expenditures of the Board of Education? I'm going to take both of these at the same time, fiscal year 2014-15 and 2015-16.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstained, recusals? Thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right, finally. Item 5, review and approve expenditures for town government for fiscal year 2014, 2015. So much for a quick meeting for not being well prepared by this board with materials ahead of time.
Prepared up to this point.
Exactly. Okay. Tell me, you're gonna start with expenditures?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, revenue, come on.
Because I think that there's no surprises here, so
Right, should- yeah.
it's comparable to last month, if not better, so
Good.
I think you'll be very happy.
Yep.
And we'll start with expenditures. I may not be able to do that myself, yes. Now we'll start with revenue. Now switch the papers. We ended the year with $1,140,000 over our revenue budget. So we've collected 101.3% of our revenue budget bottom line, and that includes the state and the town. On the town only, 101.2%. Almost every department exceeded their revenue budget. Including finance. I did tell the selectmen that this morning. I reminded them. So yes,
Time to raise the objective.
that's a result of conservative budgeting.
Budgeting, exactly.
And I think actually the conservative budgeting is showing here, and it's a very good thing.
It is.
There were some one-time revenues, we'll call them the revenues from the commercial development that really would not be appropriate to budget for. And I think we did a good job with those, and the tax collections are very strong.
And I think you hit the nail on the head, conservative budgeting with our tax collection rate, and I think it's probably prudent to keep it where it is to allow us to continue to grow fund balance.
So this is phenomenal revenue. It's just, I'm just curious about one of the smaller items. I thought that the planning and zoning might actually have more fees coming in from some of the activity. I was just a little surprised that they were coming in under.
They're really spread out between the building department and natural resources. Natural resources has inland wetlands and some of the other small conservation, if there's any conservation funds. But most of it is in building and engineering.
This much of our revenues.
Any other questions on revenues? Great job.
That's good. I'll just
Joe.
comment, we're finally seeing the benefits of our economic development, because a lot of that comes from,
DDR.
Sheila said, you know, the rock pile is it's a big contributor.
Yep.
It's where we get all our engineering fees.
Yep.
Tractor supply is another thing.
Yep.
Some fees from 66 High Street.
Yep.
So all of that we had not budgeted on.
Right.
So kudos to the departments
Departments, yep.
for their hard work.
Exactly. Good. All right, anything else, no? Expenditures.
On expenditures, as of the date of this report, the town is showing $495,000 and $495,606 under the expenditure budget. So we've expended and obligated 98.4% of our budget. We haven't closed the year yet, so you still see some encumbrances on this report. We've closed most of the ones that we believe will not be expended. These will be, so they'll be rolled into the expenditures when we close. Okay, so we're just going to assume that those are also expended. So we're going to go off the $495,000 number. And
You're pretty comfortable with that 495 number right now?
yes,
No,
yep.
Without bills trickling in late or?
No, all our bills have been posted.
Good.
On the Board of Ed side, and I'm going to bring this up because it factors into fund balance, the encumbrances have not been reflected on this report. So once the encumbrances are recorded, their number will go down to what Linda reported, I think was like
42.
43,000. So we want to talk about the 495,000 for a minute. You'll see when we get to the transfers that I actually transferred from some departments that probably will need to reserve for below the line.
Right.
And that isn't necessarily something that we have to do tonight. We can do that next month. But of the $495,000 surplus, we're going to need approximately about $100,000 for reserve for personnel, and about another 60 or so for revaluation. Because I used funds that we had, I used budget appropriations that we had set aside for those exact purposes and used those to transfer to cover the department overages.
Yep.
It works out exactly the same, bottom line.
Yep.
But, so the 495 will actually be about 345, which is basically what I projected last month in terms of expenditures. So
So you add that 43 from the Board of Ed to your 345, it's 388, and the 1140 is basically
Comes out to
15,
about
520, yeah.
yes.
It's a huge number.
So we did tell the rating agencies, and we used a conservative number of $1.2 million, and they were very happy with that. And they will look to see that we make that, that projection. So we will exceed that, and that will be a very positive reflection on our management.
Because we've got one more significant round of funding, right?
We have two more bond issues.
Two more bond issues, two bond
Yes.
issues?
Permanent financing,
Right,
yes.
permanent financing, for how much?
Will be about 15 million or so.
All right.
Between the two remaining rounds, another 15 million.
When do we anticipate going on the street for that?
August of 16 and August of 17.
15, 16, and 17, okay. Good.
If I might jump in for a moment.
Certainly, Joe.
I proposed to the Board of Selectmen this morning for their consideration, which we will, when we decide, we will then make a suggestion
Yeah.
to this board that anything in excess of the 1.2 that we consider setting up, or I believe we do have a small fund for capital improvements, that we then fund the excess to that capital improvement account. So it's not all sitting in undesignated reserve. I'd rather not go below the 1.2 because we already put that number out there of over $7 million where the undesignated reserve would be, because that's what we went to the market with. But, so I told the members of the Board of Selectmen to think about that, and we'll get back to you when we get the final numbers from the finance director.
And I think we had a conversation a few minutes ago that that would be in a direction the Board of Education would like to see as well, and I think that's going to be a fund for both. Not to bring up an old, a sore subject, but to the golf course question. With this kind of money available, is this the time for us to address that?
Not at this meeting?
Not at this meeting, but
Okay.
for consideration. I know there's some other things going on right now, but we still have a deficit in that fund that we're going to need to address at some point.
It could be part of that discussion.
Part of it, okay.
Okay. I'll leave it at that right now.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that was out there. We gotta take care of Ken once in a while.
A couple of small questions. On the police expenditures, could you explain the replacement salaries, 40,000 over?
In police,
Yeah. Page 7, I believe.
when the police department has vacancies, they don't always have to fill, they're able to maneuver their shifts, so they don't always
Okay.
need to replace
It's internal.
officers, but sometimes they do when there's vacations, several vacations, or officers sick at one time, they may have to bring in replacement salaries, and that's exactly what that's for. The overtime relates to when an officer that's on duty has to stay over to complete a report, or if there's a crisis or something like that, that's where the overtime comes in. The replacement is only when they have to replace an officer that is either on vacation, sick, or they're down an officer because of workers' comp or a vacancy. And there were several vacancies this year, which is why the full-time salaries is fiscal 15 were surplus.
You know, just given all of the expenditures that we see all around us in engineering and public works, I wonder if you might address two numbers. That would be on page 9, the road maintenance figures, winter over 50, around 50, summer close to 16. I would think they would be higher, actually.
I didn't hear all of your comments, but I can say that the snowstorm reimbursement that we're going to receive for this January snowstorm has not been recorded here.
Okay.
And so that could be in the neighborhood of 200,000 or so. It will be recorded in fiscal 16, even though it's not really attributable to 16. I don't have a commitment yet from FEMA in order to record a receivable for 6/30/15. Did that address your concerns?
Well, we went, not quite. I mean, we went over in road maintenance by, say, $65,000,
Right, and that has to do with the material for the storms generally.
but we're going to be reimbursed over 200,
Well, the 200 spans the whole town.
and labor and so
And all departments, yes.
Quite a bit of that will go to the Public Works, no?
Yes, it's public works, it's a little bit of fire, it's tree maintenance, it's the tree natural resources account. Yeah, it really spans all the departments, and there's also indirect reimbursement for the equipment that we use, that there's not necessarily a hard cost, but it covers our wear and tear. And they pay for administrative costs as well, like my time that I work on FEMA.
Yeah, there was,
That's only for one storm. Does not cover the entire winter.
That's right,
That
yes.
we're going to be reimbursed for.
2 storms.
One storm.
Really
It
get
was a
reimbursed.
weekend.
We'll only be reimbursed.
That's correct. Don't forget, we had 2 months of bad weather.
Bad weather.
Right,
Right.
Okay,
thanks.
so, just to clarify what Sheila had said.
Yes.
Okay. So, yeah, we were over because of the bad winter, but we're fortunate that New Haven County was declared a disaster area.
At the 11th hour.
Yes,
Yeah, just about.
Yeah.
So we will see a reimbursement, but that will not hit for a while, so that will be credited
This year.
for the 2016, correct me if I'm wrong, Sheila, year.
yes.
So we won't see it in the year that's
It's
just
a good picture.
included.
I just wanted, I know this is old ground. Fire department, 128,000 over budget for the year. Almost all of it in salaries, if not all of it. I believe we had some workers' comp cases. Was that the?
We had some
predominant
workers' comp
problem?
cases. We had, out of one workers' comp case came a retirement.
Okay.
So there was a vacancy, and so there was no workers' comp reimbursement coming in at that time.
All right.
So that led to a replacement, consistently for several
Right,
months
right.
for that individual. And the replacement is paid at a higher rate generally.
Right. Per contract.
Yes.
Okay. I still, at some point, I still want to sit down and understand, because I haven't been able to get my head around it, why the fire department's replacement salaries is 3 times that of the police department's replacement salaries. Yet they have the same total operating budget of $4 million. So it just, and I need to sit down, I got to talk to the fire commissioners or somebody to understand that a little bit better, how that works.
I can only say that they always have to have a full complement on the shift at one time. Where,
Make the argument the police should have the same too.
but I think that they're able to schedule it differently. They don't have, there's technical terms that I would rather not
Well, there's some
say
age
correctly, but-
guidelines, or whether.
Is that coverage by statute, or is just recommendation from the AMA?
It's not AMA, it's the IAAF
Oh, I'm
standards,
sorry.
whatever it is, right?
MMA.
MMA, whatever it is.
There's like a minimum.
That's mixed
staff
martial
there.
arts?
I follow you, though. They want to have a certain amount of
boots on the
It's just
ground for
scheduled
each shift.
differently.
Right, right. Okay. Anything else on the expenditure or revenue reports for fiscal year 2014-15?
I actually have in the fire department as well. Was there something happening with CMed? Did I see a newspaper article?
Yes, there is.
And is that affecting us?
Yes, it is. Okay. We decided to leave CMed back in the spring. I suggested that the Board of Selectmen vote to leave New Haven, we call it New Haven CMed, so it's the South Central CMed.
Okay.
Because CMed was collapsing, basically, was getting too expensive, and we decided to go with Valley Shores CMed, which is basically along the shoreline. Okay. CMed has since disbanded. There's no more South Central CMed. All of the members who were comprising the South Central CMed have gone elsewhere. Okay, some have used AMR, about 8 of them have now used a part of AMR response for their ambulance dispatching. Like I said, we, Madison and Branford have joined Valley Shores, and we're very happy with them. But what remains is to distribute the equipment or sell off the equipment. There was an unfunded liability that was due to the union for their pension. Our share was $16,800, and that's what you might be looking at. It was a fair amount. We paid it, and we're out of it. We're out of it.
So even with that, we were still only 2% over budget.
That's right.
It's not a dramatic
Because
over-account, but
what
it's certainly
happened-
a fixed number.
There was a fixed number, and we said, look, we don't need the total services of CMed. We just need the core services because we have our own 911, and the same thing with the other, most of the towns, except for some of the valley towns. So why are we paying all this money to CMed when we have our own operations? So they reduced the dues by 30%. In an effort to keep all of us together, but that still wasn't enough.
Yeah.
And we have a very good deal with Valley Shores, just like Madison and Branford, who we decided to go with them. So that's a long way of saying we're not with CMed.
Got it, okay,
CMed.
appreciate that.
Will we share in the sale of any of the revenue or the equipment or not?
We will, or we should, but my next meeting is, Karen, August 27th, I believe, yeah. I thought I was done with them. I keep going to these meetings. And when I don't go, the fire chief is my proxy. He goes. And when it's technical, he goes and I stay home.
Anything else? Okay. So, is there a motion to approve an additional $155,029 for the fiscal year 2014-2015? And that's in addition to what we had approved at the July meeting for the other June expenditures. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Recusals? None. Okay. All right, let's talk about warrants, special funds, et cetera. I'm not sure there'll be a lot of questions on warrants at this point, but
I'll start one off.
There you go.
This was purely, I just didn't know who it was, but you probably told me, we have to pay a pretty big payment to CCM, municipal service fee, $13,700 or so.
Is that on the July warrant?
Yeah, I should be a
That's
little
our
more
dues
specific, right? I got
for,
a packet for July 16th, yep, page
Those are our
10.
CCM dues that we pay annually, once a year.
That's Connect Conference of Municipalities.
Right, yes.
It's just membership dues?
Well, they are membership dues, but they really provide a great service to us, and if we had no other organization to belong to, they would be the ones that, they provide
provide us
research
statistics and
research, and they provide support for the municipalities in Hartford. to support, our,
They do a lot of advocacy, lobbying,
Yes.
advocacy work up in Hartford. And there's a variety of educational programs. I think, yeah, Lou and Mike have taken advantage of some of those too, so.
They're well worth it.
Right. And they've done things like, we've used them, I think, every time we do a salary study to determine the Board of Selectmen and the elected official salary, they're the ones that compile the data for us, that kind of thing. And I know that the Selectmen's office has used them in the past.
Legal has used it a lot.
Right.
I see. Okay, thank you. I need a little better understanding of that.
Peter?
I have a question on warrants, the property tax refunds. There are 3 of them that are very substantial, in excess of $9,000. And obviously, it must have been as a result of a lawsuit. Now, that's a precedence that has been established. Does that mean that it could be very costly to the town if all the neighbors find out in terms of who's getting these substantial tax refunds and decide to have a class action lawsuit?
I don't know if I can answer that correctly.
Jeff, you want to take that?
I can try. There's a process for what you're seeing here are the results of an assessment appeals. And they're taken, the process is that a property owner makes an application or files an appeal with the Board of Assessment Appeals and presents their argument as to why the assessment should be adjusted to reflect what the fair market value of the property was as of the date of the last revaluation. If the Board of Assessment Appeals agrees and lowers it, then it ends there and the assessment is adjusted on the grand list and the taxes go down. If they don't agree, then an appeal is taken to the Superior Court, and throughout the process, most of the cases reach a settlement between the town and the property owner. The way the courts look at it is that each property is unique, and so the idea of a class action would have to be based on something that was fundamentally improper with the actual revaluation process and not with respect to each individual property. So each property owner can look and see what their neighbor's assessment is. You could do it, I could do it, any member of the Board of Finance could go and look at to see what our property's valued at and what our neighbor's property value is at. And then they can make a decision at that point as to whether or not they want to take an appeal of that assessment to the Board of Assessment Appeals and start the process on their own. So it's kind of a case-by-case process.
Jeff, wasn't there, and Joe may be familiar with this, there was a group in one of the condo associations that's closest to the high school that was looking to be treated as an entity, as all property owners, because they were contending that their property values had gone down because of the construction at the high school?
I'm not aware of that, but
Okay.
I mean...
There was something, yeah.
I think I know the property you're talking about, but no.
Okay.
If I can add one thing, what you can't tell is if that property owner, for example, paid 100% of their taxes, and that refund just represents the fact that they overpaid, because by statute, you don't need to pay 100% of your taxes if you're under appeal. Depending on the size of your tax bill, you either pay 75 or 90%. So the refund amount, you really can't determine whether it's if it's a reduction in taxes or they just paid greater than the statutory amount.
Does everyone on this board get a copy of the Board of Assessment Appeals report? That report comes out where we show all the appeals, right?
Right, that's something that I update
Right.
every quarter or so.
Right. That might be something you could share.
Yeah,
People could
because they're
take a
just
look
about
at it.
all closed now.
It's a matter of public record, so.
Yeah, and keep in mind, the assessor keeps reminding me, so I'm going to pass this on to the board, is that when you're fighting an appeal or a claim, it's not for 1 year. You're fighting it for 5 years. So you're not losing 1 year of the difference between what the assessor assessed the property at and what the taxpayer thinks it should be assessed at. You're really, the contest is for 5 years. Yeah.
Year 2 or year 3. That's a good point, Joe.
So when you look at the legal bills, and this is why I bring it up, some people say, well, you know, you're spending this much money on legal and the difference in taxes is not that much. Well, yeah, you're right for 1 year, but multiply it by 5, and that's your difference.
And to your point, Joe, or to Peter's question, so the tax refund that you're seeing for these property owners on this statement, you won't see that next year or the year following because their assessment is adjusted and they're paying taxes based on the adjusted assessment. And so you're not going to see a refund check to these. You'll see, I mean, for those of us who've been on the board longer than others, you'll notice that after the revaluation, you'll see the refund checks, you know, for substantial amounts in the year or the 2 years following the last revaluation, and then it drops off until the next revaluation takes place, whenever that date hasn't been determined yet by the county. So.
We do the statistical every 5 years, and
And
then
next
5
one is
in
2017.
2017, I thought so.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of the smaller amounts are probably just overages in people's escrows and just small differences that
Many
need to
of
be
them are motor
refunded.
vehicles.
People sell cars,
Motor
Yeah.
vehicles.
midstream.
All right, other questions of Sheila on any of the warrants or special fund weekly checks? No? None? Okay, before you leave, let's move on to item 6. Oh, wait, do we have to approve the warrants?
It says.
Well, you need to approve the warrants for fiscal
Fiscal
2016 for July.
Right. All right, is there a motion to approve the warrants only
moved.
at this point?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Let's see,
Abstentions? Recusals? All right, item 6, discuss and take possible action on end-of-year transfers to close out fiscal year 2014, 2015. Sheila alluded to this several minutes ago, and we need transfers in the amount of $227,000 for, as you can see on the document, the backup documentation, money going into finance, registrar of voters, natural resources, fire department, communications, engineering. And the money is being transferred from contingency in 3 cases, human resources, reval, insurance, contingency, and contingency again, and human resources for a like amount of money. And Sheila talked about how this would all net out. You want to recap that?
I can. As you can see, on the left side of the schedule, it shows the departments that we need to cover. And I chose to use all of contingency, $75,000, and the balance from a combination of human resources, the revaluation, and insurance, because those are budgets that are less affected by a budget transfer. I'd rather not take it from, for example, police department salaries, because it would skew really our analysis from one year to the next. So I think this is a better way to present it, and the bottom line is the same
And
regardless.
human resources has basically been reserved for personnel.
Yes, and I'm trying not to
And that number
present line
fluctuates every year,
item
so it's really not
transfers.
that big a concern. And reval, insurance, those are minor numbers.
Yes.
I'm comfortable with that methodology. Any other questions?
human resources budgeted in the new year for pretty much what they were budgeted in the old?
Human resources, I'm presenting this as a departmental transfer rather than line item transfer, which I prefer not to do, but the money is actually, if you look in the human resources department, it's in reserve for personnel, the amount that I'm utilizing for.
It's not,
I have a question. You may have answered it already, but the potential FEMA money that may come in, it won't really match up with this year's spending, right? That's why we have to do the transfer. Where will that money flow into? Which account will it flow into?
It'll flow into general
General
fund,
fund.
and
General fund,
I'll
okay.
talk to the
All
auditors
right.
about it. I really can't record, we're not on a full accrual basis of accounting, so I can't record it in fiscal
Okay,
15.
but
and
we'll see that
So it will
perk next
go
year.
into fiscal 16 in each department where it belongs.
Any other questions?
Yeah, just really to clarify the use of contingency in a situation where, we just got done talking about we have $1 million of excess revenue and there's some underexpended funds elsewhere, and you explained why you don't want to move money from revenue and and like salary items that are gonna then, it affects the analysis going forward. But, you know, people are gonna look and say, geez, we used our contingency, that must be bad. But the fact is, it's not. It's just a way to make,
The fact is that we still have a $495,000 surplus in general funds. So regardless of how you move the budget around, it's still $495,000 surplus.
okay.
Any other questions? No? Is there a motion to transfer $227,555 as stated on the supporting documentation presented to us this evening?
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Recusals? None. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. Michelle? Committee reports. Mike, anything on the high school? Other than they're pretty much ready to go?
It's almost done.
Couple punch list items to take care of?
Pretty much.
You can have all the perks, running water.
Pretty much, that's right. Make sure you.
There is running water, yeah. There was, I heard a story about someone, I guess, it was a story that someone had come up and, to somebody else in town and said, did you hear that they messed up? They didn't put the water main in.
Yeah, I heard the same thing.
It was it's, you know, whatever you perceived when you see that, you know, when you see the trench across, oh, they forgot the water main. No, that was the separation of the science wing from the old school and the new school, so.
Must be true, right?
Yeah, I can just tell you very quickly, the building is pretty much complete. Yeah, there's some punch list items. There is nothing that is going to hinder the opening of school on September 8th. I got that from the building chair's mouth about 2 hours before our meeting, just to confirm. The abatement at the old school is about 20%. So if you do drive by the school, you'll see windows taken out and the brick around it, because that's just part of the abatement process. So they're about 20%.
Yeah, that's it.
No surprises. No surprises yet. Doesn't mean that there couldn't be a surprise as they get into, for example, ripping out the gym floor, ripping out the innards of the old school. But right now, everything is tracking on time, under budget. Everything is looking good.
Charlie's gonna give the CO?
Yeah, that was my question. The
I-
CO for the students,
Yeah.
I heard
Yep.
there's a partial one for
There-
administration.
Currently, there's a partial CO, which is
Right, for the
typical.
administration.
And that's just because as soon as you get the CO, that really triggers a number of other issues, which is basically the handover of the building. So you want to be careful that substantial completion CO is all done correctly, because then all the warranties go into effect. The partial CO is just for administrative. There is, the only issue right now, and it is not going to affect the opening of school, is some work in the auditorium that needs to be done. It was kind of expected that might run a little behind because of the issues we talked about earlier in this meeting. But other than that, school's going to open. There's nothing holding up the school opening.
What about the demolition of the east end of the old building and the ability to start driving
That,
into the,
that is all happening after, obviously, the abatement. That's going to be ongoing pretty much through the fall. I don't remember exactly what the schedule is for completion of the entire demo of the school, but I believe it's, if I remember correctly, everything will be down, and I think the base coat of the parking and all of that's going to be by the end of the fall. You really want to get everything done by November, December.
Sure.
I think it's just,
I heard December.
so the old building will be down by December.
there,
They'll reconfigure the traffic pattern and the other parking will be done by December.
Right.
That's what I was told the other day.
the field, I mean, all the grading of the fields is done. What ends up happening is you really want to get everything complete before December. I think the date is December 15th that the plants close. So they want to have the parking all
The
set up.
asphalt plants.
Asphalt plants, yeah. So they want to get the binder coats down for parking and things like that. I don't know how much they'll be usable, but I'm sure they'll be in pretty good shape. But then the final asphalt will go in probably late April. That's when the plants open up again. Sometimes they'll open up earlier if it's a good winter. Let's not count on that.
Yeah.
But
It's a good winter for them, not for us.
So we're down to 22 days? Sorry.
Yeah.
22 days.
Yeah, well, I'm assuming you did the math, I did.
I estimated.
I don't know.
This is the 17th.
Okay, sounds good to me. Yeah.
Thanks, Mike. Awesome. Old business? New business? Public forum? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Close it. Thank you all.